Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our podcast, Your Gardening Questions from Plant Talk Radio. If you have a gardening question you'd like our host Fred Howard to answer, send him an email. The email address is fred@planttalkradio.com. Now for today's question. Ashton, here's one for you and Fred. This was an email that came in from, it's another Steve, and he says, great show, so thanks, Steve. I'd like to try window boxes across the front of my house. What are your thoughts on a potting mix, fertilizer, types of plants for lots of color? The house faces west and gets full sun from noon until 5. Any experience with window boxes, Ashton?
Sure. I think of hanging baskets, containers on your deck, on your front porch, window boxes, kind of in the same way that for soil, you want something that's going to hold the moisture so that they're going to drain pretty well. So you want to make sure that they don't dry out. So something like the Miracle-Gro moisture control potting mix would be a good choice. And as far as that kind of condition, the immediate thing I think of that would give you a lot of color and hang over the sides would be something like the wave petunias.
Yes.
And of course the plant food that I like for containers is something that's going to take all that extra water that passes through, and that would be something like Osmocote. I like using that in containers and hanging baskets. The only thing to think about, though, with window boxes is if there's a big overhang that's going to keep the water from getting there from the rain and that sort of thing, unless you got one of those storms that comes in sideways, then you will need to make sure you keep it watered and don't let it dry out. Just because it's outside and it's raining, if there's a big overhang, the plants are going to stay dry.
This is extremely important, and window boxes take, let's just say, a little bit more management than the same plants in the ground. I agree with the plant choice that Ashton mentioned. Almost any annual. Then the petunias he mentioned, I'll add a little bit of vinca vine that hangs on down, or sweet potato vine. You can go almost anything you want, except for one thing you must do, or what you must not do. Do not use garden soil. It is not right. By the time you get it into the window boxes and so on, it will have broken up its structure and so on. Use a potting mix such as Ashton mentioned. There will be a little tiny bit of real soil in it, but it's by and large composed of things that do hold water, but they don't cause the plant to stay sopping wet. Your planter boxes will have to have drainage because you want the excess to run off almost immediately. And then the water retention capacity of these blends or mixes are the kinds of things that, humongous greenhouses use. There's no real soil in a plant. In a planting area for starting plants. The greenhouse can be 5,000 square feet, and there won't be a half a pound of soil in that whole area. So it's just be sure to start, as Ashton mentioned, with a potting mix. And then I definitely agree, because I've used it for years, the Osmocote, which is a slow release type, even to the extent you can buy some by the label. They'll tell you it'll last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And I think there's one for 120. Isn't that right, Ashton?
Typically for Osmocote, it's like 4 months and 6 months.
Right. Well, those are the things that will help you in terms of fertilization and the plant root growth so the top grows right. Then be careful, as Ashton mentioned, with things under the overhang. And you can overwater a planter box, but it isn't too likely if it's the right soil mix type of thing, if it's the right drainage. But just be sure then that come 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the third day since you watered, that sun's beating down on the siding of your house and reflecting onto the plants. Be sure you've been up there with a watering can or a hose or some automatic irrigation sometimes. Those are all things that you can actually make a grand bit of beauty. And the same thing as Ashton mentioned, the window boxes and the planters, big tubs, little tubs, pots, any kind of pot. My daughter used great big soup cans at one time. She used what we used to call a church key to open up the bottom of the pot. And she did use some real soil, which got her in trouble. But all of those things can work that way.
Hey, thanks again for listening to our podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our other podcasts as well, the Plant of the Week podcast and the Plant Talk Radio podcast, all on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to sponsor a daily podcast, contact us at fred@planttalkradio.com. To find out more about Fred Hauer and Plant Talk Radio, visit our website, planttalkradio.com.
Circle270media.com